In January of 2025, a hiker near East Logging Road 42 found what he thought was a stick frozen into the snow. It wasn't a stick. It was a human hand. No fresh footprints, no trail of blood, just a pale wrist rising out of the frozen ground. And a bracelet I recognized. Not from a case file, not from evidence. From my sister. Before we begin, hit subscribe to help uncover stories they tried to bury. And make sure no name stays forgotten. My name is Helena Dry. I'm a deputy sheriff with the state police based in northern Washington. But long before that, I was a local officer in the town where I was raised, a place called Keisel. Most folks wouldn't know it. Small town, few thousand people give or take. Not much up there but pine frost and stories folks don't repeat unless they've had a drink in them. I grew up thinking it was safe. I think we all did. My mom taught at the elementary school. My dad was with the sheriff's office back then. My little sister Naomi was the bright one. Funny. Always barefoot in summer, always drawing something. And I believed in the rules, in structure. I joined the force straight out of college, took pride in it. Believed that justice was something you worked toward, one step at a time. For a while it worked. Summers were quiet, winters were long. People knew each other by name, and you could drive 15 miles without passing another car. But things had a way of disappearing in Keisel. Pets, mail, the occasional engine noise out on the old logging roads after dark, sometimes girls. And when they did, nobody talked much. We told ourselves they'd run off, moved to Seattle, found work in Portland. That's what the paperwork always said. Runaway no known threat closed after 30 days. I never asked more than I had to. Not then. I was 27 when I got the call about the first body. That was Amber Redsky, a 15-year-old girl who vanished back in the summer of '97, reported missing after leaving the youth center. And she wasn't just a name on a file. She'd been close with Naomi. Back then, they used to sit on the porch together weaving bracelets out of thread. My mom taught them how. They'd compare colors, patterns, laugh about how tight or crooked the braids turned out. Amber disappeared in July. Naomi vanished 3 months later. They called her a runaway, too. 28 years passed. And then that hand showed up in the snow. I remember pulling up to the trailhead, wind biting through the trees. My cruiser crunching over ice. The man who found it wouldn't stop shaking, kept saying he didn't want to touch it, didn't want to be involved. But I recognized that bracelet the moment I saw it. Red, white, and yellow. Woven tight. A Cree pattern my sister knew by heart. And that's when everything I'd buried, every instinct I'd learned to ignore, came roaring back like the wind off the ridge. That night, I drove out to the station, unlocked the archive drawer I hadn't touched in years, and pulled Naomi's case file. What I found inside was thinner than I remembered. 5 pages. No interviews, no follow-up. Just the word runaway written in black ink and the name of the officer who filed it. My father. I stayed up most of that night sitting on the floor of my living room with the old case file laid out in front of me. Naomi's handwriting was in the margins of a photocopied flyer, one I hadn't noticed before. Just 3 words, ask about the cabins. That was all. And still, it was more than anything we'd been given back in 1997. I stared at it until my eyes ached. The bracelet found with Amber's remains had been processed and tagged as evidence, but I didn't need the label to recognize it. My mother used to make those. She taught Naomi and Amber how to braid the thread just right, how to tie the ends off so they wouldn't unravel. I could still picture the two of them on our front porch, bent over their wrists, laughing as they compared patterns. Red, yellow, and white. Naomi never finished mine. She said she wanted to make it perfect. I opened the locker drawer with the old missing persons reports. Amber Redsky, Eliza Cardinal Tina Red Bear, Jolene Reeve. All indigenous girls. All disappeared between 1995 and 2001. All logged as runaways. All files closed after a few weeks. Some weren't even 5 pages long. There were no search maps, no follow-up interviews, just a list of names that had slipped between the cracks one by one. I went back to the site before dawn. The logging trail past East Route 42 was still cordoned off, but no one stopped me. I was technically the responding officer. That was enough. I parked just off the trail and hiked in. My boots sank deep into the snow, the cold climbing up through the seams of my coat. I followed the ridgeline past where the hand had been recovered, past the trees marked with yellow tape. The forest felt heavier than it had the day before, like it knew. 20 minutes in, I reached the old red birch logging camp. It sat in a clearing maybe an acre wide, hemmed in by rusted fence posts and pine. 3 structures remained, 2 cabins and a shed. Roofs bowed under snow. Doors warped from rot. I walked toward the first cabin and pushed it open. The hinges let out a low groan. Inside it smelled like wet plywood and old oil. Dust hung in the beam of my flashlight, but the floor had been swept. Someone had been there recently. There were boot prints across the room, crisp and deep. I crouched beside them. Snow had been light that day. Whoever left those tracks had passed through in the last 24 hours. At the far wall, a blue tarp covered something heavy. I pulled it back. Shoes. Dozens of them. Sneakers. Boots. Flats. Some cracked and brittle, others stained with dried mud. None of them matched. All different sizes. All for women. My eyes stopped on one pair brown canvas, worn to the heel, blue laces frayed at the tips. Naomi's favorite shoes. I stood there for a long time, not speaking, not touching anything. Just looking. Then I moved on to the second building. The floorboards had given way in the center, revealing a dark crawl space below. In the corner, I saw a rusted pair of shackles nailed to the floor beam. Iron rings, chains. I moved toward the far wall. Names had been carved into the wood, some full, some initials, some clean, some jagged. Amber, Naomi, E. Cardinal, L. White. Others I didn't recognize. All scratched in by hand. Different handwriting. Different years. It wasn't just a cabin. It had been a holding site. Back in town, I stopped at St. Agnes Elder Home. Room 204. Eunice Redsky, Amber's grandmother. She was 93 and sharper than most people half her age. She looked up when I entered, her silver braid draped over her shoulder like always. "You found her, didn't you?" she asked. "I told her we believed the remains belonged to Amber. I asked if she still had the bracelet Amber made her, the matching one." She reached into a small wooden box beside her bed and handed it to me. "Same colors, same pattern, still intact." "She made 2, Eunice said softly. "One for me, One for Naomi. Said she wanted you to have one too, but she never finished it. I held the bracelet in my hand, then asked carefully if she'd ever heard the name Lobo. She didn't flinch, just stared out the window. "They're still out there," she said. "The ones who took her. The ones who take all our girls." Everyone stopped looking, but I didn't. The Pines remember Constable. You listen long enough, they'll tell you where the bones are buried. That night back at the station, I stayed in the archive room. The Redsky files still smelled like dust and printer toner. I flipped through the pages again. At the back, almost stuck to the folder from humidity, was a copy of an unsigned note. One line stood out. "Someone should check the old roads. The girls talk about a cabin, about the men, but nobody listens to them." I sat there under that buzzing ceiling light holding a lead someone had buried decades ago. I opened the bag of recovered items from the scene. One caught my attention, a water-damaged notebook. Spiral-bound, faded butterflies on the cover. Amber's name written in black pen on the inside flap. Most pages were blank, but near the back were scrawled fragments. Ink-smudged words broken by water and time. "The man with the belt doesn't like when we talk. Eliza says he keeps pictures. They come in the white truck. No plates. They take us one at a time. The one they call Lobo is the worst." I stared at that name. Lobo. Wolf. Spanish. I remembered something Naomi once whispered late at night a few weeks before she vanished. She'd come home from a volunteer shift at the youth shelter, quiet and pale. She said something wasn't right. Said the girls were scared. Said there were men in the woods with names like wolves. She'd told me to listen to them. I told her to go to the police. She said she had. No one listened. I opened the internal database and ran the name. No local hits. Then I tried aliases, slang nicknames, Spanish terms. Finally, something came back. Raúl Espinosa. Alias El Lobo, born in Juarez. Arrested in 1991 for trafficking in Sonora. Released in 93. Moved north. Last confirmed location, northern Alberta, 2002. Known ties to red birch logging. I stared at the screen. No extradition. No prosecution. Just silence. He'd slipped through like water through cracked ice. That night I drove to the edge of town and parked outside a single-story house behind the old grocery. Name on the mailbox read, D. Price. Donnie Price. Retired officer. He opened the door like he'd seen a ghost. "Constable Dree," he said. "Didn't expect to see you. I told him I needed to ask about Amber Redsky. And Naomi." He glanced down the hall. "My wife's out. Come in, but just for a minute." We sat in the kitchen. Still smelled like tobacco and coffee grounds. I didn't waste time. I asked why Amber's case had been closed so fast, why the others were too. He didn't look at me when he answered. "We did what we were told." I asked who told them. He said it was federal. Said digging would have stirred up panic, made the town look bad. I leaned forward and asked one more name. "Who is Lobo?" That's when he looked up for the first time. "You don't want to chase that name," he said. "I already am," I told him. He didn't say another word, but his hands shook. The next morning, the snow started falling again, heavy and quiet. and when I stepped outside, there was a package on my doorstep. No postage, no return address. Just my name written in thick black marker. Inside, something moved when I tilted it. A cassette tape and a note. You said no one listened. I did. Signed, N. The tape clicked once before it started like it had to clear its throat. Then her voice came through quiet, older, roughened at the edges, but still hers. "If you're hearing this, I guess you found it," she said. My breath caught somewhere between my ribs. I was sitting on the floor again, knees drawn up, tape recorder balanced on a stack of files. Naomi didn't sound afraid. Just tired. I don't know where I am anymore. I think we're somewhere north. There's snow. Always snow. They move us at night. I pretended to sleep last time and saw a sign, Fort Nelson. That's the last place I remember. I leaned in, barely blinking. After that, it was a long drive. Cold metal floor, no windows. Just exhaust, just noise, the smell of pine and diesel. Her words dropped into the room like stones. They call him Lobo. He's the one in charge. She paused, then added, "I thought he'd kill me the first week. Maybe he meant to, but he said I looked smart, said I could help with records. So he kept me, put me in with the older girls, the ones who keep the others quiet. I didn't move." The tape hissed softly in between sentences. She kept going. I did things, said things. I told myself it was survival. But I'm not sure anymore. I had a hand over my mouth without realizing it. There are names, Helena. Local names. Men who came up on weekends. They brought girls back with them. Some weren't from the reservation. Some were from the cities. Foster care. Some didn't speak English. Some couldn't even stand. She inhaled slowly like she was trying to hold herself together. I left a list. It's in the old ledger, the one Dad used. Red cover. If it's still there, it'll be in the cabin under the floorboards. I used to hide drawings there. He never looked. I reached over and hit stop. I already knew which cabin she meant. 40 minutes north, past the reservoir, tucked into a patch of state forest my father used to hunt during deer season. We hadn't set foot in it since he retired. I left the house without finishing my tea. The roads were slick, but I drove slow. Snow fell in a steady curtain the entire way, like the forest was trying to blur out the truth before I could reach it. I parked halfway up the drive and walked the rest. No tire tracks, no footprints, no sign anyone had been near the place in years. Inside, the air smelled like cedar and gun oil. The walls were lined with old license plates and framed patches from departments across the country. My father had always liked souvenirs. His coat still hung by the door. His boots, untouched, were lined up beneath the bench. I stepped into the living room, rolled back the corner of the old woven rug, and pulled at the floorboard I knew had always been loose. Beneath it, in a narrow gap between beams, I found a rusted pocket knife, a few bullets, and the book. Red leather. Worn down at the edges. My stomach went hollow. I flipped it open. Names, dates, dollar amounts. Tardinal, 1995, $1, $200. White, 1996, $1, $1,000. Dry hold special. I stopped on that one. Her name. My sister. Not just taken. Not just missing. Sold. I turned to the back. In Naomi's handwriting, I saw initials GRRFTD. The last one stopped me cold. T.D. Thomas Dry, my father. I drove back to town with the ledger on the passenger seat. I didn't touch the radio, didn't open the windows, just drove. As I pulled into the lot behind the station, the dispatcher came out to meet me. She looked pale. "Someone broke into the archive room," she said. "Picked the lock. Just one drawer." I followed her inside. The air was different. Colder somehow. The drawer with Amber's notebook had been opened and closed again. Nothing stolen, but someone had touched it. Gloves or not, the message was clear. They knew I was getting close. The second body was found before noon. A snowmobiler off High Ridge Trail spotted something near a collapsed blind. Blood had melted through the ice. We got the call on a static-filled channel, but I caught enough to get moving. When I arrived, Will Goyer was already there. 2 officers held the perimeter. The body was female, curled on her side hair matted to the frozen ground. Torn parka, single gunshot to the chest. The bruising looked fresh. Defensive wounds on her hands. She'd fought back. I crouched beside her and asked if we had an ID. Will nodded once. "We think it's Lorraine White, missing 3 days." I remembered her, cousin of Eliza Cardinal. She'd been helping post flyers around town, asking questions, keeping the pressure on after Amber's case reopened. And now she was gone. The autopsy confirmed it. Gunshot, high-velocity round, not military, point blank. She bled out fast. Coroner said she knew the shooter. No signs of restraint, no hesitation in the wound. I sat in the forensics lab afterward, reading through her report with the red ledger open on my lap and Naomi's voice playing through the tape deck again. She'd named someone new this time, a man listed as a handler, M. Vasquez, connected to a place called the Dusty Spur Bar. I searched the name in our system. Miguel Vasquez, owner of the Spur from 95 to 98. Shut down after a trafficking probe. No charges filed. I called Will. We need to find his last address. We tracked it to a small house, 47 Cedar Avenue, unlisted, not tied to any utilities, looked abandoned from the front. We parked a block away and approached without lights. Something felt wrong before we even knocked. No answer, no lights. But someone was inside. I knocked again. "State Police. We need to speak to the resident." A sound at the back door. Running. Will cut off the alley while I moved through the house. Cold. Furniture overturned. Fireplace filled with ash. In the living room, a pile of half-burned documents. One photo had survived. Naomi standing beside a man. Her face drawn, her body turned slightly away. The man was Vasquez. Will tackled the runner 2 blocks down. Not Vasquez, but one of the old drivers. Name flagged on payroll. I brought the photo, showed him. Asked him where Vasquez was. He looked at it, shook his head. "Gone," he said. "He knew you were coming. Said it was only a matter of time." I asked again. "Where?" He hesitated. "Probably Mexico. Chihuahua. That's where the others went. The ones who moved the girls." I stood there holding that photo and realized something Naomi said on the tape hadn't been just metaphor. They weren't gone. They were still moving. And someone back home was still helping them disappear. I didn't sleep that night. I laid on the couch with the red ledger open across my lap and Naomi's voice still running in my head. Her cassette was playing again, just the sound of her breathing between sentences, the hesitation in the way she said certain names. Vasquez, The Spur. Local men. She'd warned me not to trust anyone who'd worked with our father. Not everyone had been fooled, she said. Some had been part of it. I got up around 2 and drove out to the woods again. Brought the ledger with me this time. Will met me near the trailhead. He was already waiting with 2 travel mugs in his hands, snow clinging to his collar. He didn't ask why we were going back out there. Just nodded, handed me the coffee, and said, "Lead the way." We followed the same route as before, past the flagged perimeter, up toward the red birch clearing. The sun hadn't come up yet. The woods were quiet. Just our boots pressing into the frozen trail and the wind pulling through the trees like something remembering. When we reached the cabins, I took him through the first and second without saying much. I let him see the boot prints, the tarp, the shoes, the carved names, the crawl space. He didn't say a word, just stood there staring at the wall with his hands in his pockets, lips pressed tight. Then I led him to the third building, the one I hadn't opened yet. An old shack near the tree line sagging toward the slope behind it. The door was warped but not locked. We forced it open together. Inside, the air was stale and heavy like something had been sealed in. An old desk sat in the middle of the room, legs splayed slightly under its own weight. Filing cabinets lined the back wall, rusted shut. But it was the floor that caught my attention. One set of boards had been disturbed. Newer nails, fresh sawdust under the edge. We knelt beside it, pried it loose, and opened the trapdoor beneath. A crawl space, narrow, maybe 5 feet deep. I dropped down, first flashlight beam cutting through dust and shadow. There were mattresses. 3. Molded. Blankets pushed into the corners. A rusted tin bowl. A spoon. On the far wall, scratched into the wood in uneven lines, were the words, "No one listens to us." I stood still for a long time, hand on the wall, reading it over and over. Then I looked down. A notebook half buried under a collapsed mat. I picked it up and opened it slowly. Inside were photos, Polaroids, girls, some crying, some unconscious, most looking straight into the camera. Same room, same wall, same floorboards. Every photo had a number written in the corner. Not names, just numbers. Will crouched beside me and exhaled softly through his nose. "Jesus," he muttered. I flipped through quickly. 50 at least. Some I recognized, some I didn't. Then on the last page, under a photo of a girl with swollen eyes and a buzzed haircut, was a name written in pen, this time not marker. Naomi Dree. I closed the book and sat down hard. She hadn't died in those woods. She'd been held, documented, numbered. She'd been alive after she disappeared, weeks after. Back at the station, I scanned every photo and logged the notebook into evidence. I tagged it under an encrypted case folder and sent the contents to Interpol and our National Missing Persons Unit. 2 matches came back within 12 hours, one from Saskatchewan, one from Montana. Both girls had been listed as deceased. Both had been last seen near truck stops with cross-border access. The pattern was there finally. Someone had known. That night I drove out to Ulysses again. I didn't say much when she opened the door. Just handed her the notebook and waited while she flipped through it. Her fingers trembled once when she stopped at one of the photos. She used to carry that spoon everywhere, she said quietly, pointing at one of the images. Said it was lucky. I buried one just like it with her mother. I asked her if Naomi had ever mentioned Lobo before she vanished. She said no, not by that name, but she did write letters. Eunice got up slowly and pulled a shoebox from a drawer beside the bed. Inside were envelopes, dozens, all addressed to Amber Redsky, all in Naomi's handwriting. She never mailed them, Eunice said they were practice, but she wrote every night. I opened one. The first line read, "If they find this, I'm dead. If they don't, maybe someone will know what happened." I brought the box back to the station and read each letter front to back. Naomi had listed locations, routines, even phrases she'd overheard. One name kept coming up, Vasquez. Another showed up, late Bishop. No first name, just Bishop. Inventory checks. I went back through the old files, through the logs our father had signed as liaison for Red Birch Security. Cross-referenced vendor lists. One name matched a logistics contractor based in town. Cal Bishop. The next morning I filed a warrant request, but before it could process, my phone buzzed. A message from Will. "Check your email. You're not going to like this." It was a scanned personnel file. RCMP, dated 1996 to 1997. Sergeant Thomas Dree. My father. Assigned liaison to Red Birch Logging. Authorized security clearances. Signed off on export route permits. Linked to at least 3 unsanctioned asset seizures with incomplete forfeiture records. I stared at the screen for a long time, then closed the laptop. Everything I'd refused to see was right there, in black and white. That night I went back to Naomi's last tape. I let it play from the beginning, no skips this time. Her voice steadied near the end. "If you're reading this," she said, "then I'm gone." But he isn't. He's still out there. The man with a wolf's name. She paused. And then she said something I hadn't heard the first time. "Tell Mom I love her. And if I don't come back, remember that it was someone with teeth." He smiles when he's lying. I hit rewind, played it again. And this time I didn't doubt her. Not even for a second. The next morning I found myself sitting at my desk, staring at the edge of the red ledger like it might open on its own. I kept flipping back to the page where Naomi had written her notes. One entry caught my eye, this time M. Vasquez. Handler, Dusty Spur Bar. I'd seen the name before, buried in an old licensing form from '97, back when the Spur was still operational. The place had gone through half a dozen owners since then, but in the year Naomi vanished, it had been registered under a Miguel Vasquez, still listed as missing since 2003. No next of kin, no utility records after April of that year, no trace. I searched the Spur's old permit filings, scanned incident reports, bar fights, disturbances, anything that might have flagged attention. Nothing connected directly, but there was a pattern recurring names, same plate numbers, leaving the lot girls listed as escorted home, but never logged as arriving. I called Will. "I think Vasquez is Naomi's handler," I said, "and I think someone helped him disappear." He didn't argue, just asked, "Where do we start?" I found the last known address linked to him, 47 Cedar Avenue. We approached after sundown, parked down the street with flashlights off, weapons holstered but ready. The house looked quiet, snow untouched, windows dark, but the mailbox had been freshly painted number plate, updated just enough to avoid notice. Something about it felt wrong. I knocked twice, waited, knocked again, harder. "State police," I called. "We need to speak with the resident." There was no answer, but a shape moved behind the back curtain. Will was already peeling off toward the alley. I ran through the side gate and entered through the front. Inside, the air was sharp with smoke and cold grease. The kind of place where furniture hadn't been moved in years, but something else had. Drawers open, papers torn. The fireplace was packed with ashes, still faintly warm. In the living room, a stack of half-burned photos lay curled against the grate. One had survived the heat, scorched at the edges but intact. Naomi, maybe 17, standing beside a man, her face drawn, shoulders hunched. The man beside her smiled for the camera. Miguel Vasquez. I turned the photo over. Written in Naomi's hand were 3 numbers and a date, ND 198 July 1997. Outside, I found Will bringing a man to his feet in the snow. Early 40s, bruised, coughing, resisting just enough to make a point. Not Vasquez, but familiar. We ran his name and pulled an old payroll hit from Red Birch Transport, one of the long-haul drivers. I showed him the photo, asked where Vasquez was. He looked at it for a while before answering. Gone, he muttered. He knew someone was coming, said it was only a matter of time. I asked again. Where did he go? He hesitated. South, Chihuahua, Mexico. Probably hiding with the same people who used to move the girls. You're not going to find him by staying in Keisel. That night, I didn't go home. I sat in the operations room, pulling every interstate and cross-border file I could get cleared. I matched delivery routes, decommissioned road permits, truck inspections with no manifests. I found one company still active, Arbala Norte Transportes, based out of Chihuahua. The name showed up in an old customs manifest backdated from '99. Same year Amber Redsky's file was marked inactive. I traced it again, newer logs, same logo, same license class. Still operating, still clearing the border. I pulled Naomi's last Polaroid from evidence, zoomed in. On the side of the truck behind her, partially cut off, was the company name. Arbala Norte. Same paint color, same font. It wasn't just a memory, it was a match. I called Interpol that evening, explained everything I had. The ledger, the photos, the red trail from Kislev to Ojinaga. I got pushed up the chain. DEA joined the call from El Paso. A woman named Navarro spoke next. She'd been watching that corridor for months. Most of what comes through is fentanyl, she said. But we know there's cargo, the kind that doesn't get scanned. You say your sister was moved through Arbala Norte. We've got one of their trucks under surveillance right now, headed back toward Mexico, southbound out of Texas. The driver has links to a known brothel in the Zona Rosa district. She paused. If your sister's still alive, that's where she'd be. I packed a bag that night, filed my clearance, took a leave of absence under active case extension. Will watched from his desk, but didn't say anything until I reached the door. You sure you're ready for this? I said nothing, just nodded and walked out. I flew to El Paso, crossed into Mexico, under escort, met with Captain Hernandez of the Mexican Federal Police. He took the evidence read through the ledger, the photos, the personnel files. He didn't ask unnecessary questions. He just said you've been carrying this a long time, but you don't look tired. You look ready. I told him we only get tired when we stop moving. The raid happened at 2:04 a.m., the Rose of Fire. Neon lights flickering over shuttered glass, black steel doors bolted from the inside. The hallway smelled of bleach and perfume. We moved fast, checking doors, calling out commands. I reached the far room just as one of the team breached it with a shoulder hit. Inside were 3 women. One collapsed, one shackled to a metal bed frame, and one staring straight at me. Naomi. Her hair was shorter, skin pale, eyes sunken but wide. She flinched when I stepped forward. I lowered my weapon and dropped to my knees. "It's me," I said. "It's Helena." She didn't speak at first, then her lips moved. "About time," she whispered and fell into my arms. 4 suspects were taken into custody, 15 women recovered. One of the drivers escaped out the back alley. But inside a locked office we found what we needed. Vasquez's burner phones, fake IDs, routing logs matching the ledger. He had been there. He had run. But not fast enough. Later, as I sat beside Naomi in a trauma tent just outside the compound, I watched her breathe. Steady. Slower than before. She was wrapped in clean blankets, a shallow cut above her eyebrow, one hand still curled into a fist. Captain Hernandez stood nearby speaking softly to his team. I remember thinking for the first time in decades that maybe this wouldn't end the way it began. She woke briefly, looked at me. "You cut your hair," she murmured. I nodded. "You remember that?" She blinked once. "You always said it made you look tougher." Then she smiled, soft, barely there. "I guess you were right." And then she slept. Outside, the sky began to lighten, pale gold at the edge of the trees. And somewhere in the distance I could hear a truck engine rumbling. Not close. Not yet. But not gone. Naomi slept through most of that first day. The recovery center was on the outskirts of Ojinaga, secure but quiet. The room they gave her had barred windows, not to keep her in, but to make sure no one else could reach her. A nurse checked in every hour. Her pulse was steady. She was dehydrated, malnourished, and covered in healing bruises, but alive. I sat beside her, not saying much, just listening to the machines, the slow hum of the overhead fan. She looked older than I remembered, not just in her face, but in how she held still even in sleep. Like part of her never quite came off alert. That evening, when she finally opened her eyes fully, I thought she might not know me. But she did. "You cut your hair," she said again, voice stronger this time. I nodded. She smiled faintly. "Makes you look meaner." I smiled back, but I didn't speak. Not yet. She wasn't ready. The next morning, over warm broth and slow silence, Naomi started talking. She spoke without much emotion, like someone repeating something they'd said too many times. "They took me the night I walked home from the youth center. Same route Amber used. Same truck, white cab, no plates. 2 men, one local, one not. I think the second one was Mexican. They didn't say much. Just shoved me in, tied my wrists, put a bag over my head." She paused to sip her water, hands shaking slightly. "They drugged me. I don't know what with. I woke up in the basement of the Red Birch camp. She told me there were 5 girls in the first week, then 3, then 2, and then just her. I asked what happened to the others. She didn't blink. They sold them. She didn't cry. I did. Quietly, without moving. She looked at me and said I lasted longer because I was older, because I was smart. They needed someone who could keep track, handle numbers, write clean. I asked about the ledger. She nodded. Parts of it are mine. I wrote them to stay alive. I didn't build the trail, Helena. I just mapped it. Then she told me about Miguel Vasquez. He liked order, clean records. He didn't like mess. That's why I survived as long as I did. He said I was too valuable to ruin. I asked about Lobo. Her voice dropped. He was different, quiet, rich. He didn't like being seen, but he liked hurting. He came less often, but when he did, everyone got quiet. Even Vasquez. I asked if she ever heard his real name. She hesitated, then said, I think it's Bishop. Cal Bishop. I froze. From Kisla, she nodded. He ran logistics, met with Vasquez face to face, came to the compound twice, always in winter, said he was there to check inventory. But we knew. Then she said something that stopped me cold. He knows you. He knows our family. That night I went back to my hotel room and pulled up every contract Cal Bishop's name had ever been attached to. Between 1996 and 2001, his company oversaw freight routes through northern Alberta and southern BC, including deliveries to Red Birch Arbor Timber and Northern Trails, 3 logging companies that dissolved in the early 2000s. All of them were tied to offshore accounts. All of them used the same shell address in Chihuahua. I sent the records to Interpol. Within 12 hours, I got a reply from Will. He applied for a work visa to Mexico in 2003. It was denied. That same year, Naomi disappeared. We found footage of him near Fort Nelson 3 weeks before the last photo of her. We filed a formal request for arrest. Cal Bishop, alias El Lobo, was wanted on suspicion of human trafficking, conspiracy, and obstruction in connection with the disappearances of Naomi Dry Amber Redsky and dozens of others. But when RCMP raided his home back in Kissel, it was empty. No car, no personal items, just the smell of stale cigarette smoke and a door left cracked open at the back. Naomi asked for one thing the next day, to see the pines again. The real ones, she said. Not the ones I dreamed about. The ones that held the truth. I told her we'd go. Even if he's still out there, she asked. Especially then, I said. In the meantime, I started digging into Bishop's family. He had one known cousin, Marcus Weller, retired maintenance worker at the Kessel water treatment plant. I found him sitting at the bar of the Silver Pine Tavern, glass of rye in one hand, red eyes that hadn't seen real sleep in weeks. I sat beside him. Didn't say much at first. Then he muttered, "You're here about Cal." I said I was. "Then you're wasting your breath," he said. "He's already gone." I kept my voice low. "I'm not just here about Cal. I'm here about the girls." He downed the rest of his drink and slid an envelope from his coat. "I was there once," he said. "Just once. Red Birch." He took me up there to show off. Said it was cleaner than dope. Said girls didn't fight as hard. Inside the envelope were photographs. One of Cal and Vasquez standing beside a crate marked FN Inventory. Another of Cal shaking hands with Sheriff Glenn Rayner at what looked like a mill fundraiser. I asked Weller why he didn't come forward. He looked away. "I thought he'd kill me," he said. I didn't argue. Just told him if he didn't help now that fear would have been for nothing. That night I filed a sworn affidavit naming Cal Bishop as the coordinating link in the Red Birch trafficking operation. Interpol matched his passport to a false identity used entering Belize 2 weeks earlier, Andrew C. Langford. DEA surveillance in Chetumal had already flagged the name. 48 hours later, we tracked his path to a private compound just south of Flores, Guatemala. Cartel-aligned, remote, not state-protected. 2 days later, I stood on the tarmac with Captain Hernandez and Will waiting for clearance to cross the border. "What's he doing down there?" I asked. Hernandez didn't hesitate. "Same thing they always do. Erasing, burning, preparing the next route." Before I boarded the chopper, I called Naomi. She was still in recovery, surrounded by nurses and armed security, but her voice came through clear. "I found him," I said. There was a pause. Then, "Don't let him disappear again." I promised her I wouldn't, and this time I meant it. We landed in Guatemala just before dawn. Heat rolled in through the side doors of the chopper as the sun came up, casting a low red band over the tree line. The air smelled like oil and clay, thick with something that didn't move. The compound sat 10 miles off the main road, tucked between an abandoned airstrip and a mango farm shielded by dense brush and steel fencing. The property was owned under an alias Andrew Langford, same name Cal Bishop used when he crossed into Belize. Local authorities gave us 2 hours of cover. After that, they pulled back and left us to it. No warrant, no extradition treaty. Just intelligence urgency and a growing list of names carved into our case files. Hernandez kept his team tight. 4 men experienced quiet, every movement efficient. No show of force, no unnecessary noise. I was the only outsider they allowed inside the perimeter. Will stayed behind with a satellite relay monitoring audio and backup channels. The lead officer motioned to me before we went in. "If we find him, you let me handle it," he said. I didn't answer. We breached through the south gate at 6:41 a.m. The house was concrete and stucco with shuttered windows and vines thick against the siding. Inside, it smelled of mildew and cologne. A woman screamed from one of the back rooms, then went silent. We cleared the ground floor, fast kitchen parlor, 2 bedrooms all empty, but the office was locked from the inside. One of the men pried it open with a crowbar, and when the door swung wide, I stepped in first. The room was clean. Too clean. Air-conditioned. New desk, laptop, open, fan running. But there was no one inside. Just a phone vibrating across the table, caller ID blocked. I picked it up, let it ring once more, then hit answer. No voice. Just a single breath on the line, then a soft click. Behind the desk, taped to the wall, was a photo. Black and white. Surveillance style. Me standing outside the Keisel courthouse 1 week earlier. My hair tied back, eyes down. A small red X was drawn in the lower corner. I turned slowly, scanned the ceiling. A camera lens blinked red once, then cut off. We searched the rest of the house and outbuildings. A wine cellar with reinforced locks. A rear shed with floodlights aimed downward, not out. But the bunker behind the mango grove was what finally gave him away. It was buried beneath a false irrigation cover. One of the officers found the hatch while clearing brushed steel plate 2 feet wide, sealed with a digital lock. It took them 30 minutes to crack. When it opened, the smell hit first sweat gasoline mold. Then the sound. A slow, rhythmic buzz like an old industrial fan turning inside a pipe. The stairs led 30 feet down into the earth. No windows. one light at the base. I descended last weapon, raised pulse even. He was sitting at a metal table back to the door, cigarette burning low. Cal Bishop. Older now. Thinner. Beard unkempt. But the same posture, same tilt of the head. He didn't turn when we entered, just said, "Took you longer than I thought." The lead officer barked a warning, moved in hand on cuffs. But Cal didn't flinch, just slowly raised both hands and set them on the table. "I knew Naomi would make it out," he said. "She always was the clever one." I didn't answer. He looked at me then. His face had barely changed. Same eyes, same mouth, same smirk that never quite reached his cheeks. "You were never supposed to follow it this far," he said. "But then again, family gets messy, doesn't it?" The officer read him his rights in Spanish. He didn't resist. When they lifted him to his feet, he leaned toward me. "She kept a copy," he whispered. "Didn't she?" I met his eyes but said nothing. He laughed once, quiet and flat. "Doesn't matter. The real books are gone. You think arresting me will stop it? This thing is older than you, older than her. We were just the middlemen. They dragged him up the stairs. We found more in the basement. A file box packed with receipts, transfer logs, USB sticks labeled with initials RBDSKH. Many of the names matched victims already in our case system. Others we hadn't identified yet. The most important find was buried in a wall safe, an old cassette tape, labeled only with the date August 14th, 1997. When we got back to the safe house, I played it in the operations room. The audio was scratchy, warped by time, but the voices were clear. Vasquez, Cal, Sheriff Glenn Rayner, planning, exchanging names, discussing prices. They mentioned Naomi, Amber, a third girl I'd never heard of, Sierra. They laughed. One said, "Keep the paperwork tight. Helena's watching." My hands went cold. That night I called Naomi, told her it was over. "No," she said. "It's not." She was right. Because what we found in that basement didn't just link Cal to the crimes. It proved a chain names, documents, recordings that stretched far beyond Kissel. And now that we had it, we couldn't stop. The house was still, the moon hung low, and the wind rustled across the tin roofs. I sat there alone, listening to that tape one more time. And when the tape clicked off at the end, I heard something I hadn't noticed before. One last voice. A woman's. Barely audible. Saying, "She's still alive." Then silence. It took 4 days for the recordings to move through the right channels. The copy I submitted to Interpol was confirmed, authentic, time-stamped, and admissible. Within 72 hours, a multinational task force launched coordinated arrests across Alberta, Chihuahua, and Baja California. Vasquez was picked up in Hermosillo trying to cross into Arizona under a fake name. Sheriff Glenn Rayner was brought into custody outside of Calgary, his passport flagged after an anonymous tip. He didn't resist, didn't ask for a lawyer, just sat in the back of the cruiser and stared out the window like he'd known this day would come. I flew home that same week. Naomi met me at the airport, no press, no cameras, just her and me. She walked slow, favoring her right leg, but upright and steady. Her hair was longer than I remembered, darker. She looked older than 19. We stood there for a long time without speaking until finally she said, "They didn't win." I nodded but didn't say anything back. Some things you don't need to speak aloud to know they're true. The court proceedings began almost immediately. Vasquez pled not guilty, claimed the ledger was fabricated, that the girls came willingly, but the forensics team proved otherwise. His fingerprints were on every page Naomi wrote, his voice on every tape. Rayner tried to cut a deal, offered names, payouts, locations. The prosecution didn't need them. The grand jury returned indictments on 17 counts of human trafficking, aggravated assault conspiracy, and obstruction. The sentence came in just over a month later. Life. No parole. Cal Bishop's trial was harder. His lawyers argued chain of custody, international interference, political motive. Said the evidence from Guatemala was inadmissible. But when the second tape surfaced, one we hadn't known Naomi had copied, they had no choice. It was a backup recording, same voices, this time clearer. Bishop describing each girl as an asset, discussing transport schedules, the pine route he called it. The courtroom fell completely silent when Naomi took the stand. She didn't cry. She didn't flinch. She wore a simple black jacket and read from a lined notepad page by page. Every name. Every date. Every truckload. The judge looked sick by the time she finished. The sentence was swift. Bishop got 138 years, federal, no parole, no transfer. After the trial, a few reporters tried to reach out. Book offers came in. Podcast producers. Even a documentary crew. Naomi turned them all down. Those girls don't get a spotlight, she told me. They get peace. She moved to Oregon 6 months later. Bought a house near the coast. Quiet town, good neighbors, no questions. She still texts me every Sunday. Just a check-in. Just enough. I stayed in Kisley. Took a leave from the department, then turned in my badge for good. There wasn't anything left for me in uniform. I work part-time with a recovery nonprofit now. Help survivors get legal guidance, travel documents, names off of lists they didn't ask to be on. One day out of nowhere, I got a call from an RCMP officer I used to work with, Detective Singh. She was following up on a cold case from '97. Said a new tip had come in. An old woman dying of cancer had confessed something about a girl who'd gone missing near Clearwater. A child around 11. Singh asked if I had time to look over the files. I told her I did. She faxed the records over that evening. The girl's name was Sierra Lee. The same name we'd heard on the tape. The same girl Naomi had mentioned in passing once quietly years ago when she was still learning how to speak like herself again. The file was thin. No family, no photo, just a rough sketch and a statement from a nurse who thought she remembered treating a girl with that name long ago near the logging camps. But then something strange. Attached to the record was a handwritten note signed by a social worker in Dawson Creek. It said, Sierra Lee may have been relocated under protective identity in 2001. Status unknown. Not confirmed deceased? I called Singh right away. What does that mean? I asked. She hesitated. Then it means she might still be alive. That night I sat on the porch of my sister's house. Naomi had flown in for a few days just to visit, she said. She brought lemon bars and a scarf she'd knitted herself. We didn't talk about the trial, or the compound, or Cal. We sat there under the stars, sipping tea, listening to the wind move through the spruce trees. And at some point, Naomi turned to me and said, there are still others out there. You know that, right? I nodded. Yeah. She looked down at her hands. Then we find them. It wasn't a question. It was a promise. And I intended to keep it. Some nights I still play the tape, not to relive it, but to remember the sound of Naomi's voice. The way it didn't shake when she named them. The way she said Sierra Lee like she was still out there somewhere waiting to be found. The courts did what they could. Cal Bishop will never walk free again. Vasquez is gone. Rayner, too. Their records are sealed with red stamps and wire-bound folders buried in archives no one will care to reopen. Justice, at least on paper, was served. But paper fades, and the truth has corners the law never touches. After everything, Naomi stayed in Oregon, quiet town near Florence. She volunteers at a shelter, now helps girls who've been through too much. Doesn't tell them her story, just listens to theirs. I think that's her way of healing being what no one was for her. As for me, I'm still in Kiesel. The house is smaller now, fewer lights, but the porch faces the trees, and when the wind moves through them at night, I can almost believe time isn't as sharp as it used to be. I still work with Singh. We track cases that were never closed. Some end in silence, others in names added to the ledger, and once in a while we find someone still breathing on the other end. That's enough. I never found Sierra. We tried. Naomi sent letters, filed requests, even walked through parts of Clearwater on foot just looking. But no one ever confirmed where she went or if she made it past 2001. The case is still flagged as inactive, not deceased, which in this line of work is a kind of hope. Sometimes people ask me how I kept going, how I didn't walk away. I don't have a clean answer. Maybe it's because once you hear a name whispered in the dark, amber Naomi Sierra, you can't unhear it. You carry it. You carry all of them. And you don't let them vanish again. We tell these stories not because they're easy, but because someone has to remember. If this one stayed with you, share it. Speak their names, so no one else gets buried beneath silence.